Now we'll go into the background of why we chose the company PayPal. So when we think about PayPal, what essentially comes to mind? So PayPal is essentially a company that mainly facilitates online transactions and it allows users to send and receive money. Users can also pay online merchant vendors and send money to family and friends. And essentially, the mindset that the founders of the company had behind this was to replace a previously inefficient and inconsistent system of money, physical cash and money and checks to an online platform. PayPal also streamlines online presence for businesses because they help to facilitate different payment plan acceptance, including credit and debit. And PayPal users can also have a PayPal balance, which also helps increase their flexibility online. Moreover, in certain countries, currency exchange and international payments are also supported. And in more recent times, PayPal's Buy Now, Pay Later is a delayed payment plan that allows users to pay in installments. So just a brief history of PayPal. So in 1998 in Palo Alto, California, Max Levchin, Peter Thiel, and Luke Nosek were the founders of Cofinity, which was later rebranded to PayPal. And Elon Musk, as you can see in the photo, was also an early investor and a person of higher management in PayPal. Now, PayPal introduced their first product, which was a digital wallet, in 1999. So for the time, it was sort of the very first of its kind to help facilitate those online transactions. Another notable time a couple years later, in 2002, PayPal became the official payment partner of eBay, which also helped contribute to its success as eBay was a very large e-commerce platform at the time. And in 2011, PayPal reached 100 million users, which was a very good milestone. Excuse me. And in 2013, it actually acquired Venmo, which further added to its momentum as Venmo is something that the younger generation uses, especially in places like college today. And some more company statistics to sort of give you a better background of our company we chose here, which is PayPal. According to their official website at the end of the 2023 fiscal year, they have 426 million active merchant and user accounts. They've had 25 billion transactions, and they've had $1.53 trillion in total payment volume of money sent and received. And they have around 27,200 employees across the world. So obviously PayPal has a big footprint and they've been successful in their terms of revenue and volume that they've accomplished. So that was just some background about the company that we've chosen. Now, how do we determine our target country, right? We have our business PayPal and we want to expand it. So how do we determine the target country? And a great way to do this is with the simplified market penetration grid, which is a good form of analysis. So my other two teammates here will go over two other countries. I will go over Mongolia and assess the certain variables of why we thought Mongolia was a good fit. So as we can see here, Mongolia, there are a lot of variables on the screen here for our simplified market penetration grid, and we won't have time to get into all of them, but I can go over certain variables that did stand out and helps us to see why Mongolia would be a good fit. So obviously in the opportunity section, a higher scale or a higher number is more desirable. In the risk section, a lower number is more desirable. So one that stood out was the 4 in sales potential. And this really stood out to us because Mongolia has definitely a younger population. It's up and coming, and they have the increased infrastructure for sort of digital and online circumstances. And the combination of these two would allow great amount of sales and sort of potential if PayPal were to expand into Mongolia, because they have the right target audience of younger users who are looking for something that is more convenient and feasible and efficient, which is what PayPal offers. And they also have the infrastructure to help facilitate that. And another variable that stood out to us was the possibility of government incentives, which also it has a 3 on the weight scale, which is pretty good. And this is because PayPal, again, with it sort of being not necessarily a developed country, more of a developing country, the government has put out incentives for certain ventures of innovation and technology. So that would allow for about a better integration for PayPal to go into a foreign market, which would be Mongolia. And there obviously are a couple other variables which we wouldn't have time to get into, but there at the same time in the risk section, not every country is perfect, so there will definitely be some risk here and there. One that did stand out to us was that of natural disaster, which had a 3 on the scale, which is quite high for that variable. And this is because Mongolia is in a part of the world that is sort of, in a rural, sort of nomadic area. It's sort of landlocked. So there are, it's in a little bit of a mountainous region, a little bit of a plateau, flatland, like a lot of different topography and geography. And because of that, they're prone to earthquakes, they're prone to floods, droughts, things like that. So, luckily for us, since PayPal is an online and digital platform, generally damages to physical infrastructure that would be caused by natural disasters wouldn't have as much as an effect as we are on an online platform, as opposed to a brick and mortar store or, something else. However, that's not to say that certain infrastructure will be impacted, because obviously you do need electricity, and you need, 5G towers, and you need these things to help facilitate an online infrastructure. So, there are pros and cons, but we will, look into addressing those as they arise. But again, it's not as bad as damages to physical infrastructure, such as brick and mortar stores. So that's something that we looked into, and that's why, we sort of weighed it as we did. And after the analysis of the certain variables, Mongolia came to a 15 in opportunity and just a 7 in risk. And compared to the other 2 countries, that does weigh pretty well. So that's why Mongolia was our target country, and our other 2 teammates will analyze Lithuania and Kazakhstan as to why those were not the target countries.
Hi, my name is Saanvi, and I'll be talking about the simplified market penetration grid that I worked on. So for this grid, I worked on the Lithuania portion of the grid. So first, I found that Lithuania allows 100% foreign ownership, which means that the company can be owned in a country that other than Lithuania. So in this case, the United States. Next, I looked at opportunity. So for sales potential, I found that Lithuania has a lot of opportunity for foreign sales, which would be good for our company. So that's why I rated it a 5. Next was possibility of governmental incentives, which I rated a 3 because I found for Lithuania, they have a very high possibility of getting government incentives. Next, I looked at the infrastructure, and currently Lithuania's country's infrastructure is very good, so I rated it a 2. And then next was the ease of external integration, which was like a foreign company getting integrated into the country of Lithuania, which I also found was really good in Lithuania, so I rated it a 4. Next, I looked at tax rate. So I found that Lithuania's tax rate is pretty average, so I rated it a 1 since it's in the middle. And last, I looked at labor conditions in Lithuania, and I found that it was also pretty average, but not too bad. So I rated it a 2. And when you total these up, it was a 17, which is higher than both Kazakhstan and Mongolia. And then the last thing I looked at was risk. So first I looked at the political economy and right now it's doing okay. So I rated it a 4. And I also found for natural disaster that Lithuania does not have any natural disasters. So I also rated that a 4. And then last for next for foreign exchange, I found that foreign exchange rate is pretty good as well. So I rated it a 3. And then for competitiveness, I found that it was pretty average as well. So I rated it a 1. And then when that was totaled, it was a 12, which was better than both Kazakhstan and Mongolia. Next, I looked at the opportunity risk matrix. So, following the market penetration grid that I completed, I found that the risk isn't too high and the opportunity is pretty good too. So, I put Lithuania in the top.
Now we're on cultural environment. This is Hofstede's insights for the two countries and the two cultural dimensions that we're going to be looking at. The two countries is Mongolia and the United States, and the two cultural dimensions that we're going to be specifically looking at is power distance and uncertainty avoidance. Power distance. Mongolia has a PDI score of 93, which means that the Mongolians value hierarchical relationships and respect authority figures. There is a significant power gap between those that have the power in Mongolia and the general population. Most people just accept the unequal power that is existing in Mongolia. Meanwhile, for the United States, it has a PDI score of 40, which shows that people from different positions in the workplace are able to rely on each other. And that could look like how employees and bosses work with one another. The challenges when it comes to having these sort of PDI scores, which I mentioned over here, for Mongolia, there is no defense against power abuse by superiors, which it can mean that a lot of people that have authority can misuse their power against the people that are in lower classes. And there's a big division when it comes to employees and bosses in the workplace, which I mentioned earlier, that there's like a big gap between those that are in power and those that are from the population, which are the general people. These are some adaptations that I recommend for Americans in order to get along with the Mongolians, which is lead meetings in a formal way where they can exchange business information with one another. And the Americans should be offering to give small gifts in order to show respect for the business values that Mongolia show. Now we're going to be talking about this uncertainty avoidance. When it comes to Mongolia, they face ongoing economic uncertainty, and the examples that are mentioned there is low labor force, participation, high inflation, and there's many more. And those ongoing economic uncertainties can actually impact Mongolia in the long run. And what I've noticed is that bar graph over here, that both the US and Mongolia, what they have in common is that they both have low uncertainty avoidance scores. But for the US, they have a high acceptance of new ideas, innovation, and being able to express their own ideas. And due to the uncertainty avoidance that Mongolia has, it really impacts global shocks and also border issues. If Mongolia is able to resolve the issues that they have when it comes to border and global shocks, they could actually benefit and see economically grow as a country. And there's challenges when it comes to making business with Mongolia, since Americans can actually have challenges when it comes to trading. And the reason why is they're going to have challenges when it comes to trading is due to the reasonings I mentioned earlier, which is global shocks and border issues. So the adaptations that I recommend that Americans should introduce changes very slowly where they could earn the trust of the Mongolians. And they should be patient with Mongolia, since Mongolia right now is going through a rough time right now. By showing patience, it could actually grow into a beautiful relationship between America and Mongolia to be able to work with one another in the long run. So now we're on to religion and language. The main religion that is being shown in Mongolia is Buddhism. And the primary language they speak over there is Mongolian. The values that Mongolians value in their country is right for both men and women, they have gender roles for both men and women. So basically, they have important roles that they play in order to have a happy family, which is the next point that I'm going to mention is how important families are in Mongolia, which shows that Mongolia really value having a strong family and also being able to support one another. For business, like I mentioned a few slides before, that the Mongolians they actually have respect for the hierarchy. Something interesting I noticed is that they show respectful eye contact to one another. They also value decision making, and a big part for businesses in Mongolia in order to function is also to have negotiation with one another to come into an agreement. The etiquette that is being shown in Mongolia is greetings, gift giving. They also have traditional values such as the importance of family, hospitality, and token appreciation, which showing thanks to others. They have a social structure, which is the Kot Ali is like some sort of group that they have. They collaborate with one another, which is the next point, which is collaborations. Something that's very important that they value in the social structure is another point that I wanted to mention is that they share responsibilities with one another and helping each other out.
My name is Skylar Caravella, and I did political environment. My first slide consists of democratic versus autocratic. Ukanagan is the president of Mongolia who began his term on June 25th of 2021. The country is part of the Mongolian People's Party membership, which is the largest party membership. The Mongolian People's Party is a social democratic political party that was originally founded as a communist party in 1920. It is now the oldest party in the country of Mongolia. Now, regardless of their system of government formation, it is broken up into three different sections: executive, judicial, and legislative. This may sound familiar considering our system of government in the United States is the exact same. The executive branch is because of power being divided between a president and prime minister. Legislative is because of the state great Khural. Judicial branch is because of the constitutional court having power to supervise the implementation of the constitution. Moving on to the political freedom scores of Mongolia. As you can see on the slides, Mongolia has a pretty high rating with their freedom types. Overall, this country is 84% free, with their political rights being 90% free and civil liberties being 80% free. People who have their own rights to express their political feelings and organize in different political parties of their choosing. Various segments of the population, such as different races, religions, ethnics, and etc., have access to full political rights. Regarding freedom of beliefs, there is free and independent media, meaning people are free to express their feelings online and post whatever they would like. Individuals are also free to practice their faiths and religions in public or private, without agitation or retribution. Citizens enjoy freedom of movement, such as being able to change their place of residency, employment, and education. Comparing all of this to United States political freedom score, we have an overall rating of 83% free, with political rights being 82% free and civil liberties being 84% free. Overall, Mongolia is actually ranked as being more free than the United States. Regarding their legal system, Mongolia uses a civil law system which is based on the written laws and codes. Genghis Khan was the founder and the first Khan of the Mongol Empire. After he spent most of his entirety of his life uniting the Mongol tribes, he led multiple battles in the military himself. He led conquests of the Western Xia dynasty in 1209, the Kara Khitan in 1218, the Khwarezmian Empire in 1221, and the Jin dynasty in 1234. Genghis used warfare knowledge and different varieties of spy techniques to better understand his enemies and conquer them successfully. Many of the locals across Asia considered him an evil person. Any town or city that rejected the Mongols was subject to absolute destruction. Soldiers were required to execute a certain number of people in the cities they were fighting in. He created the Yasa also to maintain religious beliefs, orders, and disciplines. They also have something known as the 12 Tables, which was the first legal code of this Roman Republic to help solve the issues between the poor and the wealthy and powerful landowners. It is based off of concepts, categories, and rules that were taken from Roman law with some representatives from canon law. These systems covered over 60% of the world, with the same practices being held in Rome and Germany. Although Mongolia has aimed to modernize their laws and integrate international normals and practices, all of these laws have a huge impact on how they run their civil law system today. Mongolia operates under a rule of law organization, particularly since its early transition in the 1990s. The legislative branch creates the law, and it is the judiciary's role to ensure that laws are being followed in all cases. For example, this means that judges can only allow the law and rules to follow by, not create them. Out of all the countries, Mongolia has a score of 64 out of 142, with 142 being the lowest score for a poorly order of government rule of law system. Their overall score, considering constraints on government powers, absence of corruption, open government, fundamental rights, order and security, regulatory enforcement, civil justice, and criminal justice, is 0.53 out of 1. This is compared to the global average of 0.55 out of 1, with 1 being the most perfect government system. Comparing this to the United States, we have a score of 26 out of 142, which is a lot higher of a score than Mongolia. Our overall score is 0.70 out of 1, which is also a higher score than Mongolia. For my final slide, we will be analyzing the Corruption Perception Index. Mongolia has an overall score of 33 out of 100, with 100 being very clean and 0 being highly corrupt. The ranking out of all 180 countries is 121 out of 180, again with 180 being the most corrupt countries. As you can see on the chart, over the past since 2014, their score has continuously gone worse. 69% of Mongolians think that this type of government corruption is an issue worth attending to. This is more than half of Mongolia, which goes to show how big of an issue this truly is for them. Comparing this to the United States, our overall score is 69 out of 100, with again 100 being very clean and 0 being highly corrupt. Our rank is 24 out of 180, which means we're in the top 25 countries with the least amount of corruptions as of 2023. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Carlos Rojina, and I will be presenting the sustainability portion for this project. Ecological impact. So Mongolia shares many of the common ecological issues that other countries around the world face. Mongolia is composed of many mountain ranges, forest ranges, semi-desert, and desert zones as well. Mongolia contains roughly around 11,500 different species of plants and trees, as well as around or roughly 14,000 different species of animals that include insects, reptiles, fish, and mammals. The major natural threats that Mongolia faces include climate change, water shortage or drought, land abuse changes, which come in the form of forest fires, air pollution, water contamination, illegal logging, and deforestation. Sorry about that. Although Mongolia has become rich with natural resources due to the increased demand for mining, there has yet to be any plans of restoration for the land around these mines, which is leaving the ecosystems around them in critical condition. Moving on, sustainability and spillover. The Human Development Index, or HDI, which is in the graph on the top right, is a score that in summary assesses the average achievement of 3 basic dimensions. Those are being number 1, the length of life and quality of health. Number 2, the quality of life and the ability or access to knowledge. And number 3, bringing the rank of the living standard where it sits at. The HDI score is commonly represented in a value between 0 and 1. For reference, countries that are more highly developed will hold a minimum score of 0.8 and above. The United States sits at a 0.927, and as of 2022, Mongolia holds an HDI score of 0.741. With some information included in the graph, we can see that the life expectancy from birth stands at around 73 years. With a gross national income per capita of roughly around $10,400. If we move over to the graph on the left, we see sustainability. By definition, sustainability refers to the practices that will positively impact economic growth without any negative impacts in culture, environment, or any social aspects in the future of the country. Of the 166 countries that are ranked on sustainability, on the Sustainability Development Report, Mongolia sits at 99th with a sustainability score of 66.31 out of 100. In order to achieve a perfect score of 100 out of 100, countries must completely satisfy all 17 of the existing Sustainable Development Goals, or in other words, the SDGs, which In short, are categories that summarize goals that would be optimal for the highest quality of living, health, economy, and political standing. Moving on to the bottom right chart, we can see the spillover score there at the end, which is sitting at 93.7. For a little bit more information, spillover by definition refers to when an event in one country causes some type of effect or ripple effect for that matter in the economy of another country. The spillover score means that when the score is high, there are more positive and fewer negative spillover effects. Like I mentioned before, 93.7 is Mongolia's score, and it sits relatively high, meaning that whatever comes out of Mongolia is very beneficial for the countries that are reliant on those things. Climate change. Just to give a quick story or background knowledge, Sukbatar is a Mongolian herder and farmer who, in an interview with the World Bank Group early this year, revealed his personal experiences when it came down to the effects of climate change for his farms, and for his vegetation and all things like that. He said that in his personal experience, he has seen almost a 30% reduction in the number of plants that he used to see grow since the year 2000. Him and many of his fellow herders and farmer friends have come together to try to meet with local and federal law enforcement and government officials to come up with plans in place to be able to at least secure enough water to sustain their living livestock and the remainder of their vegetation. With an average increase in temperature of 2 degrees Celsius and a very steady decline in the amount of rainfall per year for the last 70 years, herders and farmers have essentially had to turn away from vegetation and focus more on livestock in order to compensate for the money that they're losing when it comes to their vegetation. They've had to resort to even waiting to the spring and summertime for all the snowfall to melt for them to be able to reuse all the water that they have available. Deforestation. With already facing illegal logging, forest fires, and pests that are progressively eating away at the tree supply, the steadily increasing population as well is adding on to the issue. With there being more of a population, the increase in demand for forest products such as wood, lumber, in order to build homes, to build farms, and things like that, is going up with it. As the seventh largest East Asian country, Mongolia is covered in roughly 17.5 million hectares in trees, with the number slowly decreasing. With there being loose restrictions and almost no governmental plans at the moment to save these forests, northern forests have been commercially logged, leaving almost nothing but stumps in the ground. Clear cutting, unfortunately, has been the most preferred method by certain companies to completely excavate the land as a whole, leaving almost no trees and zero possibility for any regrowing. A lot of these clear cutting segments have been left in such horrible condition that regrowing would simply not be an option in order to save some of the ecosystems that are reliant on these trees. Water pollution. The scarcity of water is constantly increasing from country to country and year by year, but Mongolia faces this challenge in its own way with very little workaround for its people. Mongolian households face a major problem in that 30% of the standing homes do not have access to safe drinking water. Meanwhile, a whole 56% of all homes don't have the proper sanitization tools to ensure that the water they consume is really safe for them to have. To make matters worse, unfortunately, these issues can be severe depending on the area in which you live in, your financial status, and even down to your gender. UNICEF Mongolia, in collaboration with water service regulatory commissions, ran tests on the quality of water supply in Mongolia, and they concluded that the traces of radon, uranium, and lead were above the considered to be safe levels stated by the World Health Organization. In the limited supply of groundwater supply, or in other words, wells throughout the country, 38% of these fail to even meet national standard for drinking water, and 30% of these need special filters and disinfection systems in order for them to be safe and drinkable. With the poor economic status of some of the areas in Mongolia, roughly around 4% of these wells, or these existing wells, have such high levels of lead, arsenic, chromium, and copper that the water isn't used for consumption at all. That water becomes essentially useless unless they're looking to wash things, to clean things, and try to avoid keeping it away from any vegetation that they plan on consuming later on or sell for a profit if that's what they do. Strategies, or in other words, ways that we can, or that Mongolia can try to suffice and make things better. Mongolia, since 2004, has been working with several herding families and several environmentalists to try to support the different economies and different ecosystems throughout their country. Solutions for water pollution include using WASH systems, WASH, safety into climate policies. They plan to implement new plans, budgets, as well as increasing the amount of sanitization tools that they give around to all the families, in order to solve a spillover effect, or to increase the score in their spillover. Plans have been in place for them to be able to reach a more digitized trading market that will diversify their ability and give them a little bit more leverage when it comes to trading with other nations such as the US and their neighboring countries as well. Um, strengthening the They plan to also strengthen the management of over 47 million hectares of Mongolia's environmental network, and they plan to safeguard around 14 and a half million hectares, in order to keep certain restrictions and certain limitations to what different companies can do in order to grow and protect their environment. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Kathy and I'll be going over economic environment in Mongolia. Mongolia and the United States both used a mixed economy which consists of socialism and capitalism. This is where the government and private companies make decisions on production and services. The GDP measures the size and health of a country's economy, which is a key indicator that explains overall performance of a country's economy. Mongolia has a real GDP of 19.8 billion and a growth rate of 7.023% compared to the US growth rate of 2.5%. GDP per capita measures the amount of goods and services produced by each individual, and according to the World Bank for Mongolia, the GDP per capita is 5,764 and 80 cents. Compared to the United States, the GDP of Mongolia looks a lot lower, but that could be due to the population difference and the amount of people employed.
Now we're on to poverty. The national official poverty in 2020 in Mongolia was 27.8%, 0.6 percentage points lower than in 2018. Basically, in 2020, the percentage of people that were living in poverty was way less compared to in 2018, which shows that they're making some sort of progress of the people that are struggling, that are living in poverty. And for the urban poverty in 2018, for the Mongolians, it was dropped by 0.7 percentage points to 26.5%. But the rural poverty fell by 0.3 percentage points to 30.5%. The trend that we're seeing in Mongolia is that as the years progress, even though it's not a lot of change when it comes to the poverty being decreased, it's like it's slowly going down, the amount of people that are struggling living in poverty. But meanwhile, when it comes to the United States in 2020, the poverty rate was 11.4%. It was up 1.0 percentage point from 10.5% in 2019. And for 2019, there was 15.4% of people living in rural areas that had an income below the poverty line. And for people that lived in urban areas, had a poverty rate of 11.9% in the United States. So the numbers are similar for the United States for both the rural areas and for the people that are living in urban areas. It's like they're both similar.
Income inequality and distribution for Mongolia. Every country uses the Gini index to measure the country's income distribution. Closer to 0 means perfect equality, where closer to 100 means perfect inequality. And according to the World Bank in 2022, Mongolia's income inequality is at 31.4% versus the United States, which is at 41.3%. This shows that Mongolia has less income inequality. This could be due to lack of skills and education, which suggests why it might be lower as they struggle to find employment. Economic freedom in Mongolia. According to the Index of Economic Freedom, in 2024, Mongolia has a freedom score of 60.6. This means that the country is moderately free as it ranks 76 out of 184 compared to the United States, which ranks 25 out of 184. The business freedom, trade freedom, and investment freedom in Mongolia is just like the one in the United States. However, Mongolia struggles severely from corruption and regulatory inefficiencies. There are inconsistencies in the regulations present and lack of coordination and weak enforcement, which limits Mongolia's full benefit of free market economy. Labor and unemployment. Unemployment in Mongolia is at 6.13% according to the World Factbook in 2023. Unemployment of youth is at 11.4%, where 10.3% is for males and 12.4% is females. As you can see in the graph, it has been moving up and down from 2000 to 2023. This is due to the struggles of integrating young individuals into the workforce. Mining being a dominant sector towards Mongolia's GDP requires adequate skills and knowledge to work. This is why hiring younger individuals is not sufficient as the job is too dangerous and they lack the proper skills. Inflation rate. According to the World Factbook in 2023, cost of goods have risen by 10.35% in Mongolia. This means that there are higher living expenses for families and individuals as it is becoming more expensive to buy basic wants and needs. The cause of this is currency depreciation and rising global food prices. High inflation can impact daily life of everyone as it reduces their purchasing power, but despite this, it has been lower since 2022, which was at 15.2%. For the rise in goods and services. Education in Mongolia. According to UNICEF, enrollment rate in school for Mongolia is at 98%, with a completion rate of 75%. Essentially, they have the same education system as the United States. However, there are major disparities in Mongolia's education for quality and access to education between the rural regions and urban regions. Combined with teacher shortages and outdated curriculum, this impacts Mongolia's workforce and economy as a whole. Economic growth. The mining sector is the most dominant driving force for Mongolia's economy. It accounts for 22% of Mongolia's GDP, and the other 80% is from exports, which are the goods and services that Mongolia sells to other countries. Mongolia has also started investing more in infrastructure development, such as building new roads, railways, and energy projects. This not only boosts economic activity within the country, but also expedites connectivity with others as well.
Hi, my name is Jarrell. This is the technological environment of Mongolia. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you so much for watching our video. It means a lot. But now that we're done with the economic environment with those two, let's proceed with the technological environment of Mongolia with me. Let's start with Mongolia's internet infrastructure. Throughout the country, they have 3G and 4G LTE wireless mobile telecommunications. That just means that the cell tech that they have in Mongolia is 3G and 4G LTE. A good example is you, the viewer, your phone most likely has 5G LTE provided by your cell carrier. So in this case, 3G and 4G LTE is just it's the prevailing majority in Mongolia. But that isn't to say that Mongolia does not have 5G. There's currently a 5G implementation in process in Mongolia. It's present in certain cities and locations, but for the most part, users in Mongolia have access to 3G and 4G LTE. The internet penetration in Mongolia is 83.9%. That just means that's the percentage of the population that has access to the internet. They have 5.13 million cellular mobile connections, which is equal to 147.8% of Mongolia's population. The percent is higher than 100%. That just means that there are certain individuals in Mongolia that have multiple cell mobile connections. Moving on to the topic of streaming, Mongolia's streaming rate is uncommon. User penetration is only at 32.5%. However, it is rapidly growing nonetheless due to the high demand and increasing internet usage. So the world can expect Mongolia's streaming percentage, the amount of people that are streaming on Mongolia, to increase in the coming years. Now let's move on to Mongolia's tech industry, the status of it. Unfortunately, Mongolia's startup scene is struggling. New businesses in the country have trouble with funding, recruitment, and sales. These three problems are the most common problems that startups have in Mongolia. And another contributor to the struggling startup scene is the insufficient legal environment supporting business development. The government doesn't have a lot of policies that help Mongolian startups, and the ones that are in place just don't help them all too well. They need to be better. However, that isn't to say that the potential for the tech industry in Mongolia isn't there. Mongolia is actually referred to as the Silicon Steppe. It's the equivalent of California's Silicon Valley, and the term is used to refer to Mongolia's technological potential because it's the fifth best country for Asian startups. So overall, it's still growing. It has great foundations, but it definitely needs more support. Moving on to the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Mongolia, all the universities and some institutes in the country are expected to do research. It's just a rule that they have in place. The universities and certain institutions in Mongolia are expected to do research, to be dedicated to research. There are also a wide range of startup incubators and accelerators, as well as investment companies that are present in the country. There are just a lot of companies and organizations out there that are committed to helping entrepreneurs in Mongolia get their feet off the ground and help their businesses run. They have a large mentorship community present. Aside from the mentorship programs that exist in Mongolia, the plethora of them, there's also a lot of individuals that serve as mentors that exist that are willing to help Mongolian startups succeed. So there definitely is a large community for mentors present in the country. The top companies in Mongolia, they consist of bank, mining, fuel, beverage, and energy companies. For the most part, the biggest companies in Mongolia contribute to the infrastructure of the country. And Mongolia has a sizable tech community. A good example of this is the many tech conventions and conferences that exist in the country. The best example is Dev Summit, which is Mongolia's largest tech convention. And yes, that's pretty much it for the sizable tech community. Now moving on to the support for technological growth. The schools in Mongolia, they adhere to the International Computer Driving License. That's an organization that is committed to raising digital competence in schools, workplaces, and society overall. So Mongolia schools adhere to their framework to help their students learn how to use technology to the best of their ability. the technology industry in Mongolia is recognized as promising. The government has been seen to be currently working towards promoting it as the primary industry, like we've seen before. It is considered as the Silicon Step. But for the most part, the tech industry is still lagging behind Mongolia compared to the rest of Asia. It's agreed upon that extra attention is needed, and the government may need to work more on the policies that are in place to help the startups. But yes, that's the end of my part of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed. These are my sources right here. And yeah, thank you so much.